Hello, everybody. Um, we are now in Chapter 6, Scenery. We begin discussing all of the design elements involved in theater production. Chapter 6 begins on page 133 in the textbook. When we attend a theater production, we first encounter the environment, the look and the size of the space, the size of the auditorium, the size of the stage. Is it large? Is it small? Is it formal or informal? And then once the production begins, we become aware of the performers, the roles they are playing, as well as the story that begins to unfold. Along with these elements, which we immediately notice, there are other design factors that affect how we experience a production. Now, the scenery, and by scenery, we can include video and projections. That's going to be addressed a bit later, but video and projection systems are being used quite a bit in theater today. Okay, so the scenery, the costumes, the lighting, the sound. In their own way, these are indispensable elements of the theatrical experience. As we begin to take in the visual elements of a performance, we should look for specifics. Ask yourself questions like, is the scenery realistic? Does it resemble a recognizable kitchen or bedroom or office? Or is the scenery abstract? Think about shapes, steps, levels, or platforms. Is it futuristic? Or would you say it's dreamlike? What about the costumes? Are they like everyday clothes? Or do they suggest some period? Could it be ancient Rome, the American Revolution, the Civil War? Or sometimes we pinpoint a particular decade, the 1920s, the 1960s, or current time, the 2020s. Are the costumes fancy? Do they look like Halloween outfits? Do they resemble clothing from daily life? Representing professional roles, as we've discussed in previous lectures, such as clothing that a judge would wear, like a judge's robe, clothing like a police uniform, a white lab coat, that of a medical doctor. So you get the idea. Now, as for the lighting, is it what we would expect in a normal setting? Coming from sunlight outdoors, or lamps, lamps or ceiling lights. Perhaps the lighting is abstract or arbitrary. Beams of light cutting through the darkness, special lighting illuminating only one part of the stage while the other part of the stage is in complete darkness. We've also got to take sound into account. We cannot forget about sound. Are there arbitrary sounds? Is there a music track? Special effects such as sudden eruptions of synthetic noises? Or is the sound realistic? For example, sirens for ambulances, thunder to signify that there's a storm approaching. So in all of these areas, we should be conscious of the visual and oral signals that are being sent to us, the audience, continuously throughout the production. Who prepares these signals? They are the designers and all the technicians and others who work with them. If I had it to do over, I am not so sure I would have gone into performance and directing as my areas of speciality in theater. Looking back, I may have gone into a design area, scenery and lighting, perhaps. There are so many jobs available in technical theater, jobs in design and in technical theater and production, earning a bachelor's degree in performing arts or theater, earning a master's degree, and yes, you can earn a doctoral degree in theater and performing arts as well. So different levels of education. And where that can take you in professional theater. I've worked in theater companies before, and when I was much younger, in my 20s, that was really my goal. I wanted to work in theater administration in whatever capacity, some type of management role, and then I always saw myself continuing to perform. Although I don't think I ever really imagined performance being my bread and butter. Theater administration was something I was interested in. So I've done that, and then I found teaching, something that I really love. I don't think I'll ever stop teaching. Even after I retire, I think I'll continue to teach part-time, which is what I'm doing now. I've taught full-time, and now I'm a part-time professor again. So let's move on. I digress. Scene design is what we are talking about today, specifically. Scenery provides a visual guide to the place or the places, plural, in which the action of a theater piece takes place. And I'm looking at page 134, 135 in the textbook if you are following along. The scene designer creates the visual world in which a play unfolds. And together with the playwright and the director, the scene designer determines whether a scene is realistic or in the realm of fantasy. The scene designer decides on the colors, shapes, and visual style that the spectators view and the actors inhabit. We are accustomed to stage settings in everyday life, but as with other elements in theater, there is an important difference between interior decoration in real life and set designs for the stage. Now, for example, the stage designer must deal with scale, the relationship of the performer in the set to his or her surroundings. And this must in turn correspond to the scale of settings we experience in the world outside of the theater. The scale in a stage set might be different from that of a living room or a courtroom in real life. The scene designer has specific objectives. So in preparing scenery for a stage production, a scene designer has the following objectives. Number one, help set the tone and style of the production. Number two, establish the locale and period in which the play takes place. Number 3, develop a design concept consistent with the director's concept. Number 4, provide a central image or metaphor where appropriate. Number 5, ensure that scenery is coordinated with other production elements. Number 6, solve practical design problems. So those 6 objectives are very important for the scene designer to maintain. The textbook goes in greater detail about establishing the tone and style. Page 135 over to 136. And I'm going to throw a term out for you. Realism. This has come up before. Okay, I just want you to be clear on the terminology. Remember, that is what the midterm exam is all about in this class. It's a test of terminology. So when you go through the textbook, what is in bold? What is in italics? That stuff is important. Realism. Broadly, an attempt to present on stage people, places, and events corresponding to those in everyday life. I've given that definition to you before. Now you're getting it again. Non-realism. All types of theater that depart from observable reality. That's non-realism. And continuing on with those objectives, pages 138, page 139, we have establishing the locale and the period. We have developing a design concept. And page 140, 141, providing a central image or metaphor. Scene design sets the tone. Good scene design sets the tone. It sets the style of a production. It lets the audience know where and when the action takes place, and it lets the audience know whether the play or musical is a serious piece of work or if it's a comedy or some other type of drama. And think about how important and how prevalent setting the tone is for a production. Think about film for a moment. Some of you, if not most of you, if not all of you, have favorite film directors. And let's take one of mine, Tim Burton. When I see a Tim Burton film, within the first 2 or 3 minutes, I am aware that it is a Tim Burton production. You know why? For those of you that know Tim Burton's films, you know exactly why. There's a certain tone, there's a certain style in his work. It's very dark. It's macabre. And of course, we have Danny Elfman providing the musical score. So, I mean, he does that with all of Tim Burton's films. So there are things, what else? Well, most of the time, Johnny Depp is in the movie. So, but think about that for a moment. What other directors, film directors, do you fancy? And think about their excuse me. Think about their tone and style and how you begin to define what a Steven Spielberg production is, what a Tim Burton production is, what a Quentin Tarantino production is, etc. Right? So just something to think about. Elements of scene design. There are various elements of scene design. Number 1, line. The outline or silhouette of elements on stage. So, think about curved lines versus sharply angular lines. So the first element of scene design is line. The second element of scene design is mass, the overall bulk or weight of scenic elements. For example, a series of high, heavy platforms versus a bare stage, or a stage with minimal set design. Think of a stage with only a single tree. That's it. Just a single tree. So a very barren stage at best. Number 3, composition. That's the balance and arrangement of elements. The way elements are arranged, mostly to one side of the stage, for example, right? Think, are most of the items on one side of the stage in a vertical or horizontal configuration? Or are the items on stage, the furnishings, the set pieces, are they equally distributed on stage? Number 4, texture. That's the feel projected by surfaces and fabrics. For example, the slickness of chrome or glass versus the roughness of brick or burlap. So texture, those different materials that we can use in scenic design as well as costume design. Number 5 is color. The shadings and contrasts of color combinations. Think about how various shades of blue could be used to symbolize a scene that is cold. Maybe it's a graveyard scene. So not only is that color going to be used in the scene design, but maybe the lighting design as well. And to contrast that, we could use a color like amber, which is going to brighten up the scene. And with lighting in particular, it's going to that could be representational of daylight, of a bright sunny day. Ground plan. That's another term you need to know. What is a ground plan? That's a blueprint, or it's a floor plan of the stage indicating the placement of scenery, furniture, doors, windows, the various levels of the stage, the walls of rooms, of platforms, things like that. So that's a ground plan. We're thinking about the physical layout, the playing area. The playing area must obviously fit into a certain stage space and accommodate the performers. A designer cannot plan a gigantic stage setting for a theater where the proscenium opening is only 20 feet wide and the stage is no more than 15 feet deep. And by the same token, to design a small room in the midst of a 40-foot stage opening, that might be ludicrous as well. These are things that the scene designer has to account for. There's a lot of problem solving to get it right. I gave you the ground plan. Moving on. Oh, and on page 142 in the textbook, there is an example of a ground plan you can take a look at. Let's move on. Pages 144, 145. Another term I'm going to give you is a wagon. This is a low platform set on wheels. Wagon stages are brought on stage electronically, these days, using computer assistance or by stagehands, if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, which is still fine. And believe me, that's what I'm most accustomed to. Using stagehands to help, move the wagon on and off the stage. A fly loft. What is a fly loft? Space above the stage where scenery can be lifted out of sight by ropes and pulleys. And you find that rope and pulley system located somewhere on stage left or stage right. And so instead of coming from the sides, scenery can be dropped from the fly loft. To fly is the term used when scenery is raised into the area above the stage. It's put out of sight of the audience. So, flat. What is a flat? That's a scenic unit consisting of canvas stretched across a wooden frame, often used with similar units to create a set. You can design a room. You can design, structure. You can design a castle wall, a prison cell, etc. You can design this with flats. So it's a wooden frame with canvas stretched across it. We paint the canvas to make it look like whatever we need it to look like. It can look like concrete. It can look like a brick wall. It can look like a wooden shiplap, whatever we need it to look like. So we use flats. What is a scrim? That's a thin, open weave fabric. It's nearly transparent when it's lit from behind. And a scrim is a special type of scenery. It's normally made of gauze or some kind of cloth. And it can be painted like a regular flat. It could be painted. There's no wooden frame involved with the scrim, but the wide mesh of the cloth allows light to pass through it, basically. So, a prop. I bet you all know what a prop is, right? Prop is short for properties, meaning objects. Objects used by performers on stage, or they're necessary to complete a set. So props can be minimal in a stage play. Props can be abundant. And who is it that collects the props? We have props masters. Sometimes the props master will go and find props that are needed. Other times, special props may have to be designed and built. So it really depends on what the director is looking for. A special kind of scene device is screen projection. This would fall under special effects. So an image can be projected on a screen either from in front, as in an ordinary movie theater, or from behind. Rear projection, we call it. The advantage of projection from behind is that the performers will not be in the beam of light, so therefore there's not going to be any shadows or silhouettes. So projections offer many advantages. Images can change with the well, let's see, what am I trying to say? The use of video and projection has led to scene designers either becoming proficient with this new technology, or with video and projection designers being employed as part of the design team. So the bottom line is projection systems, video is being used quite heavily in theater today. I have used video and projection in most of the productions I've directed in the past 6 or 7 years. So not all of them, but most of them. Today, film, TV, because of their technical capabilities, have very realistic special effects. CGI today is amazing. I've told students before, we as a modern audience are desensitized to CGI. We go to the theater knowing now that it's going to look fantastic. It wasn't always that way, when CGI was still young, very new. I mean, we're still improving upon our technology, obviously. But I think today we expect it to look real and fantastic. The use of special effects, however, that's almost as old as theater itself. From the Greeks onward, theater has tried to create the illusion of the miraculous or the extraordinary. So, back in ancient Greece, you would have people, today we would say backstage, but so you would have people backstage or somewhere to the side of the stage, and they would be making noises to create sound and special effects, banging on metal pots and stoneware, to create sounds needed for the production. Um, Smoke would be created. They would use fire and have smoke bellowing onto the stage, sometimes to represent uh, a nasty part of the afterlife. It might be a representation of hell. So they would have they called it a hell mouth, and the hell mouth represented hell, Hades, and demons. So you would have smoke coming from the hell mouth on stage, and screams and sounds that um, were supposed to be representative of um, that realm of darkness. So, and that again, we're talking about ancient Greece. So, special effects go back a long, long time. Um, Rendering is another term I want you to know. A rendering, that's a complete drawing of a set, of set design. That's a complete drawing of a set, and that's most often done in color. That's what a rendering is. If a director asks to see a complete rendering, the scene designer is going to provide that. Um, let's see, moving on. Technical director. What is the technical director? That's the staff member responsible for scheduling, construction, and installation of all theatrical technical equipment. He or she is responsible for guaranteeing that designs are executed according to the designer's specifications. So that technical director is going to report to the scene designer and or the director. I've functioned in the tech director capacity, although that's not my expertise, as I've explained. I am more of a performer. I am more of a director, but I have functioned as a tech director at the college I worked at for the past 6 years. I functioned as their resident tech director, so I know how to do all that stuff. I don't consider it to be my specialty, but I think I explained to you guys that getting a well-rounded undergraduate education in theater and learning to do all the stuff behind the scenes and behind the stage, that is so beneficial for a performing arts major. Even if you don't plan to go on and be a techie or a designer in theater, you still need to learn how to do all that stuff. So I've become a jack of all trades in theater, I guess. So that's been to my benefit many, many times. Let's see, I don't want to leave any terms out. This is a relatively short chapter, chapter 6. Let's see. Bear with me a moment. I'm going to make sure I have all this information. Just know that in closing, let's say in closing, we encounter forms of scene design in everyday life. I've mentioned how we often in real life encounter theatrical elements. They're there, and when you know how to look for them, you're always going to see them. We encounter forms of scene design. Think about the carefully planned decor of a restaurant. I was in an Asian restaurant recently, and I thought the decor was fantastic. It reminded me of something that I might want to put on a stage, as part of set design. So think about the planned decor of a restaurant or a hotel lobby, or just a well decorated apartment. Whatever you imagine that to be, right? Someone's apartment, someone's living room, someone's kitchen. Scene design for the stage differs from interior decorating. It's not the same thing. It creates scene design creates an environment and an atmosphere that is not complete until occupied by actors, and it's able to meet the practical needs of a script. So that's essentially the difference. In addition to creating an environment, the scene designer has the following objectives, and I gave those to you before: to set tone and style, distinguish realism from non-realism, establish time and place, develop a design concept, provide a central design metaphor, coordinate scenery with other elements, and deal with those practical considerations. And I encourage you to read through chapter 6 to get a bit more detail about those objectives in scene design. The scene designer works closely with the director and other designers and creates a series of drawings, sketches, and of course renderings, and models of what the final stage picture is going to look like. Watch the video that I sent you. If you have, it's part of it's in discussion board. That video on scene design, which takes you, it's maybe about a half hour long, I think, but it lets you examine the life of theater scene designers. These are people that do it for a living, and they make models. You see the models that they make and ship to the theater companies when they're attempting to get a new gig as that theater's resident scenic designer. Or if they're not going to have a home base and work for a particular theater company, they might apply for different design positions. So freelance is essentially what I'm talking about. You can be a freelance designer in theater and make a good living. So check out that video. The scenic charge artist is another probably final term I'm going to throw out you in this lecture, but a scenic charge artist and additional scenic artists translate the look shown in models and renderings and paint elevations into the full-scale version of the design. The scenic charge artist is going to be in charge of all the painting that's going to go into creating that design, the scene design. So they're taking the rendering from the scene designer, and they're going to help put that into help build that essentially and finish the design work. There are a lot of positions in theater that help you to earn a paycheck and enjoy what you do for a living. It's not just the scene designer and the scenic charge artists, and there are other additional artists as well. There are just general painters. There are carpenters. There are master electricians employed by professional and regional theater companies all over the country, all over the world, making a living. So many positions and job opportunities. I've heard most of my life, don't major in theater, don't major in the performing arts. You're going to have a hard time finding a job. That is not true. It's not true. Now, you might have to move. You might have to relocate to find the job you're looking for. You're not always going to find them in your hometown. Keep that in mind. But there are so many jobs available. Theater companies, regional companies, in higher ed, at universities and colleges, we hire for production staff, production positions in theater, and we haven't got to costume design yet. That's going to be chapter 7, the next chapter. But there are more jobs available in the costume shops as well. So please disregard that. If you hear anyone say that, if you have someone in your family that wants to major in an art, they want to major in arts and or the humanities, you should encourage that. Have them contact me. All right, tell them to email me. We'll set up a phone call. I'll talk to them. I'll let them know the reality. So, all right, guys, that's it for this week. That finishes chapter 6. Read chapter 6. Watch the video. Do the discussion board. And remember, the midterm exam is over chapters 1 through 6. And I've sent an email out about that, so check your email. Midterm exam coming up soon. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.